Customary UW mug.
Oh, very nice. That's a fancy one.
So I think it's the UW.
So how's everything going with you?
Oh, hectic. It's the end of semester.
I know, it's
Getting done.
crazy.
Yeah,
It's been such a crazy time.
I know. No, I think go through process. Right? The hard part is when you know so many people, and they keep asking you about chancellor's speech.
Oh.
I'm not going to talk. He's a good friend. He was chair of computer science.
Oh, yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard. and sometimes you get swept away and you're like, "Wait,"
Yep.
So, I'm looking forward to next week. It's going to be really interesting.
Especially given that we know a little more than most others, just because we sat through the whole process.
Yeah.
Privy to more information.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting because they all seem very excited, which is great.
Good.
Good. So, we'll see. Hope we'll have a good process next week and get a lot of input. So, we shall see.
Yep.
We're waiting for Kelda.
Yeah, I think so. This is one of those things where I agree to do it, and then what am I getting myself into?
I know,
What am I
that's
gonna
exactly
say?
how I feel.
Karen was the first person asked.
Yeah.
I'm sure she told you.
Oh, yeah. She's like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, she shouldn't.
I know, and it was funny because I know both Michelle and Jack from a long time ago.
Yep.
And I was in the Regent meeting chairing the education committee, and they kept bugging me. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm saying yes to, but okay. And then I can change my mind. And then I'm like, oh no, what did I do?
Yeah.
What did I do? So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of frustration. I don't know.
Yeah, I
So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Mike Bernard Donalds. I'm the president of the Public Representation Organization of the Faculty Senate, PROFS, and my welcome is on behalf of PROFS and ASPRO, the Academic Staff Public Representation Organization, who is co-hosting this event. I'd like to say a few words and then introduce our panelists. The last legislative session, there were a number of bills that were proposed, passed, or signed into law that affected the University of Wisconsin, or would have affected the University of Wisconsin in how it delivered its educational mission. So we have today a panel of individuals who will help explore how this legislative session signals the legislature's approach to the university in the next year, one which includes a gubernatorial and legislative elections in the fall. Each panelist will give a brief statement, and then our moderator will ask questions of our panel. Those of you here have cards at your tables on which you should write any questions that you have for our panelists, and we will collect these up and give them to our moderator, and she will ask them as well. Our first speaker, who we expect to come momentarily, is Senator Calder Royce, Democrat of Madison. She represents the 26th Senate District. She was elected in 2020 after 2 terms in the Assembly. She serves on 7 committees, including the University and Technical Colleges Committee. Senator Joan Ballweg, a Republican from R-Markesan, is representing the 14th Senate District. She was elected also in 2020 after serving in the Assembly since 2004. She serves on 6 committees, including the Joint Finance Committee. UW Regent Amy Blumenfeld Bogost was appointed in 2020 and will serve through 2027. She is a practicing attorney in the area of victims of sensitive crimes and Title IX. She has a BA in political science from UW-Madison. Ananth Seshadri is the Warnock Distinguished Chair in Economics at UW-Madison, and he's the chair of the department until May. He specializes in macroeconomics and public finance and has studied the effects of state funding on public universities. Our moderator today is Jessie Opoien. She is a reporter from the Capital Times, and she joined the paper in 2013 covering government and politics and served as the opinion editor from 2019 to 2021. She now serves as the Capital Bureau Chief. Let me also say to those of you who are here and who are not members of PROFS, please sign up. We have membership cards in the back. And if you sign up today, you get a free PROFS mug. So Jessie, let me turn it over to you.
Well, thank you all for being here, and thanks to our panelists for joining us today. I'll remind you again, even though you just heard it, please feel free to submit questions on the cards in front of you. You folks are the ones who are here, so we want to make sure we get to the questions that you want answers to. But before we get into the questions, we're just going to give each panelist a few minutes to introduce themselves and make a little opening statement. You can just go down the line, I think.
All right, thank you very much. I will get started then. So I first have to say that 3 of my 3 kids all attended Madison. 2 graduated from here. The other one wanted to get to work, so he didn't stick around to graduate. I'm on campus quite a bit. I have football tickets and now baseball season tickets, and this is on my phone. So my husband knows where my heart is here. So I appreciate very much being part of this panel. This past session, I have not served on the colleges and universities or university committee, but every session I was in the assembly, I did serve on that committee, and I asked, especially for that committee, which was very traditional to have someone who actually had a campus in their district. And I said, no, it's not just that you have a campus in your district, it's because you have kids and young people that go to the university. So you really need to have a wide variety of folks, not just someone who has a campus sitting in their Senate district or assembly district. As far as what went on with UW budget this past year, a very different year, of course, with coming off of COVID, all of the additional funding, whether it was good or bad, the COVID-19 pandemic money that came to the universities, how that money was spread out and given to reimburse students. We're still reeling in many ways as to what to do with so much of the ARPA money, the CARES Act money. It's still coming through right now. We just, in joint finance earlier this week, approved the plan for all the bipartisan infrastructure law money, which is road money that's going to our state, counties, and municipalities. So overall, there was, I think, one of the bigger investments that we made in the budget this year was in the capital budget when it came to UW system as well as UW-Madison campus. Funding for the new College of Letters and Science academic building, total $88.5 million project. Funding for the engineering drive utilities replacement and renovation project. This is needed before you get to the engineering building. So I think that was a good first step in going through that. Something that because of the work I'm doing on joint finance and also as the chair of the Agriculture and Tourism Committee, really felt that we needed to get into the budget the upgrades for the Wisconsin Veterinary Diagnostics Lab up at Barron. So that is on track, but something that is going to help every campus, especially Madison, the $100 million in maintenance and renovation funds for UW's system. So that is something that was the #1 priority for UW's system. Now, every campus gives the system their list of wishes, and then those wishes get graded and brought to the governor and to the legislature. So we are very attentive to what system is interested in moving forward as priorities. I think a couple of mentions, Mike mentioned a couple of the bills that came through this year that I supported, and on several of them I was co-sponsors. As we said, the planning money for the engineering building, the flexibility to invest in additional working capital. So you could actually have revenue generated from the working capital that you have. And then a couple of things we've done for the School of Nursing, more money for nurse educators and so on. And something that I've worked on for many years actually is just how the Wisconsin-Minnesota tuition reciprocity program works. And since I've been in the legislature, we've made some improvements. This last bill did not get through the system. I supported that, and I would hope that that is also something that is supposed to, that will come back. Being the group we're talking to, there was a 2 and a 2 pay increase for faculty, staff, and employees that went to all state employees. Being on the ag side of things, increase for UW Extension, many of the things both in research as well as in county partnerships, I think are very important, that I love that we've been able to do. And giving the authority for tuition back to the Board of Regents, I think was something that should be in their purview. But having kids that first started here at the university in 2000 to the time the last one graduated in 2015, I know exactly how much tuition changed during that 11-year period. And my last kid only had advantage of tuition freeze for one term, but it's back in the hands of the Board of Regents, and hopefully that will all come back to be a responsible program with input from students in the campuses. So we'll go from there. Thank you, Jessie.
Thank you so much. Thank you to PROFS for inviting me to be here with all of you today. Since Senator Ballweg started, I have 3 kids as well, and 2 of them graduated from undergrad here, and my oldest is about to finish UW Law School here. So lots and lots of Badgers in my family, and myself a Badger, and also besides being an attorney in my day job, I'm going to put a plug in for I was one of the founders of the National Tribal Trial College that it takes place at the UW Law School, and it involves Indigenous and Native communities throughout North America that come here every summer to obtain a certificate, which is pretty much like a law degree in tribal courts. So I think it's our 9th year this year. And one of my passions, too, is trying to get more Indigenous and Native students into the UW system, which I think we can do. When I became a regent, it's a very daunting experience, not being a public person, and it's just been such a privilege to be able to serve all of you in the UW system. It's been a very big learning curve. I'm learning every day as I go out to all the campuses and talk to people. But I already knew something big coming into this, that it's the UW system, UW-Madison is a huge economic impact that we have on our state. A study from 2018 cited to $24 billion overall impact on Wisconsin, and we generate and support over 170,000 jobs, let alone the students, faculty, and staff. There were positives as far as turning to the last legislative session. There were definitely positives, and I don't want to belabor that point too much, but Governor Evers has increased the state investment in the UW system. He's been, as we all know, he's been a strong supporter of the UW system, with his budget proposal supporting students and including a 2% pay increase for employees in each year of the biennium. Additionally, the governor has directly increased the state's investment in the UW system. He gave $25 million to the system to support tuition freezes for the next 2 years, and $5 million to increase campus mental health services. That's one thing that, as chair of the Education Committee, I'm very passionate about. We know the pandemic has had a huge effect on students, faculty, and staff, and system-wide. We're happy the focus is really being brought back to provide campuses to help with mental health and other student-focused services. And I know that Senator Ballweg has also mentioned, I don't want to mention it again, the engineering, the money towards nurses, and the Minnesota. I'm hoping the reciprocity can be hopefully in the very near future. I think it's really important to get that passed. But I just have to mention that at one of the last Regent meetings, what campuses in Madison likes to do with Regents is take them into the scariest buildings. So we support that budget for new buildings, and it's kind of like going into the haunted house on campuses. And the engineering building, they kept saying, watch your step, as wires were dangling from, pools of water and loose wires. So I'm very happy that got funded. I appreciate being here, and I think we're looking forward ahead to more better things coming to the UW. So thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Kelder Royce, and I serve in the state senate. And I have the privilege of representing the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus in this district. I also previously served 2 terms in the assembly. I'm a small business owner and an entrepreneur. And most importantly, I'm a Badger. I'm a graduate of the law school here. And so I care deeply about this university as an alum and as a member of the community and as a parent of kids who I hope will be future Badgers. I have 2 stepkids who are Gophers, so tuition reciprocity is high on my list of things to address. But I think there's good news and bad news when it comes to what's happened with the university. Obviously, it's great to see that Governor Evers is reversing a long trend of declining support for the university. And I think there is starting to be a real understanding that when we are continually slashing funds to our important public higher ed institutions, it is going to hurt our economy. And if you look at what our peer states are doing that have big, wonderful, prestigious research institutions, they are seeing that when you make investments, that you are going to attract students that are going to become workers, they are going to start businesses, and you're going to have a more vibrant economy. And that's what we need to do here in Wisconsin. I think it's also really important that as the legislature has decreased support so significantly for public higher ed over the decades, that the legislature needs to take a more hands-off approach in terms of governance and administration. It's really problematic for the legislature to only be providing 10% or 15% of the funds for the university, and everything else is coming from students and from private grants and from other sources. And the legislature still wants to dictate which campuses should close and what classes are taught and which professors, whether they should be able to have tenure or not, and all these kind of really micromanaging things that are detrimental to the university and really should be left in the hands of the experts, the people who work in academia, the people who understand and have the closest relationships with employers and what's going to be important in training our workforce and how to make the university as vibrant and valuable a resource as it can be. So I really trust the university to make those decisions, and I want to deliver more flexibility and remove the sort of government bureaucracy that has crept in over the years. I think the university is more than capable of managing its own building projects, and it will save money and be able to do the kind of bespoke contracts that are needed when you're building complicated educational facilities like a chemistry building, for instance. It's not like building 30 tract homes where everything is the same. So the university needs that kind of flexibility, and I think it's important for the legislature to recognize that and kind of get into the 21st century. We also really have to address issues of cost and accessibility, and Bucky's tuition promise was a great step in that direction. We also need to address the crisis of student debt for people who have already gone to college or who have had to stall their education because they can't afford to continue. So those are things that I'm passionate about and will continue working on, but I'm mostly excited to hear your questions and your thoughts.
Okay, thank you for having me on the show. I did bring my customary UW mug. I don't have any badges in my family, but I'll tell you one quick story. I first came to Arizona State to do my master's in economics, and a good professor just told me, this is what they call a party school in America. Just get out of here. And little did I realize that 4 years later, I'd be a Badger in another party school. So that's my UW-Madison story. So I maybe wanted to give you two facts, and then we can debate how we're going to address these two facts. So one is that the social rate of return, or the societal rate of return to investing in higher ed, especially a flagship R1 campus such as UW-Madison, is extremely high. Regent Bogost alluded to the $1 or $25 calculation that consulting firms put out. You can look at it any which way. The societal rate of return to investing in education, especially at a time like this, is incredibly high, right? We can debate who should make that investment. Should it be the state via GPR? Should it be students via in-state tuition or an out-of-state tuition? Should it be donors? Should it be faculty, right, by writing NSF and NIH grants, which is what we do. And so I believe everyone should have a part in this for the mission of the university to be successful, but I'll come back to this. The second is that the private rate of return to going to college is incredibly high. Right? By this I mean the return to the individual is incredibly high. So it's no wonder that we have people from both sides of the aisle saying they had a great experience when their children went to UW-Madison. Right? We get caught in these debates about college debt, but here's a simple fact which was calculated by Avery and Turner. So what they did was they said, let's look at what would a college graduate earn if this student actually finished 4 years of college relative to just stopping with a high school diploma, right? So it's a very simple calculation that involves two costs. The big cost is not the direct cost, which is tuition and fees, but the big cost is the opportunity cost. That is the fact that if you stopped with a high school diploma, you don't earn for those 4 years. So they account for these two costs, and they find that on average, the average American over the course of their lifetime would earn about $500,000 more. So this is like $500,000 more over the course of, say, a 40-year working horizon relative to their counterpart who stopped with a high school diploma. Okay, so it's a social rate of return is high, and the private rate of return is high, which is no wonder that UW-Madison gets, 55,000 or close to 60,000 applicants for 7,500 slots. So we've had big investments that have been made in Madison over the last century and beyond, which is the reason why we are the flagship that we are. If you look at our GPR relative to peers, we are lagging behind, right? So that's most definitely the case. But where we are lagging behind are two important areas, and I commonly refer to them as price controls and capital controls. So at some level, we are the most micromanaged amongst Tier 1, R1 flagship universities. We do not have the ability to raise tuition, even reasonable tuition increases. I just looked up this morning, our tuition and fees, $10,700. Minnesota, a legislatively acceptable comparable with a reciprocity arrangement, $15,300, like a good 40% higher. Is it possible to maintain the quality of our instruction, quality of our services, when our tuition and fees are significantly lower than our counterparts? I've never been in favor of price controls in any circumstance, and this is no exception. So at some point, my hope is that the regents do take a kind of a good look at this and essentially allow for reasonable tuition pricing to set in. We have Bucky's tuition promise, which is promoted access. If you want to promote access, there are many other better ways of doing it. Now, more than tuition, the second issue that I'll briefly talk about is bonding authority. We do not have the ability to bond and issue debt with debt backed by our program revenue. And this is different from any other major research university, right? So if we had had bonding authority, we would have already built the engineering building. The humanities building would have been done. We would have had the ability to basically go in and say, we're going to expand a program and use those program revenues to fund essentially a 100-year bond at very low interest rates, which, by the way, have started to go up now. So the lack of an ability to manage construction projects and lack of an ability to kind of fund rational economic activity does not happen, right? So our state's GDP would in fact be higher. Students would be better off. Residents would be better off. The state could be telling us, hey, you could bond on your own, Madison. You don't need our support. You don't need it to be backed by state taxpayer dollars. So My sincere hope is, that, and we're starting to see some cracks, right? So one of the narratives you get is UW-Madison is a perfectly fine institution. I would caution that we need to compare UW-Madison with other flagships, Minnesota, Michigan, Ann Arbor, right? The relevant comparison is not, say, UWM or Green Bay. They have very different missions. And if you have that, make that comparison, we are going down in terms of rankings, in terms of federal dollars that are raised. And we're also going down in terms of rankings in terms of the US News and World Report, which all academics here love to hate, but we all know that people care about it. So I just hope some sincere progress can be made in terms of relaxing these extreme forms of price controls and capital controls. I'll stop there.
Thank you, everyone. Looking ahead to the upcoming legislative session, looking ahead to upcoming academic years, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing the UW system, and what is the legislature and the state government's role in helping the system address those challenges? Anyone can jump in, sorry.
Well, I guess I'll start again, and then I'll let somebody else start the next one. Unknown at this point. We certainly looks like we're going to have quite a healthy balance in our checkbook. It's about $2 billion right now. The projected balance that you've seen advertised is $3.8 billion, but that's projected at the end of, as of June 30th of 2023. We see, we'll have to ask the economics professor, what is going to happen now with just the cost of doing everything, where some reports say we're at a rate of 10% inflation right now. Where are things going with ultimately, hopefully a positive result of what's going to happen in Ukraine, or is that going to continue to be a continuing issue? We already talked about the reciprocity piece that I think is going to come back. So where are we going to be in our budget? We'll get started on that a year from now. I'm in the middle of my term, so I know I'm going to be back, as is Senator Royce. So we're both definitely going to be back in the legislature. Who knows who's going to be the governor next term? Who's going to be preparing that next budget? We just don't know. But I think we're on a positive path in Wisconsin. We just don't know what all the dynamics are going to be. But I did want to throw out to the professor the question on bonding authority. Some of you were probably here some years ago when a former chancellor worked with a governor to try to separate Madison from the rest of the system. I think that is something that the regents need to really look at, is how we work in the system to support the whole system. And yes, if Madison was a standalone, we could probably look at it in a different way, but it's not. So do we continue to support Superior and the now satellite campuses through the program? How much support do we provide for extension and everything? The turmoil, if you're not aware, a lot of turmoil in working with extension in our county partners is a real concern right now to many of us local legislators. So we're in good shape. Not sure exactly where we're going. I don't disagree with autonomy for the regents to look at tuition, those kinds of things. But the bonding, if we're going to stay a system, I think we have to act as a system.
I'll jump in. I appreciate hearing some optimism from Senator Ballweg. It's always good to be hopeful about the future. But I'm fairly concerned about the many uncertainties that we face and how that's going to impact the university. And the first one is obviously the state of our politics and what's going to happen in the gubernatorial race, because there's a huge difference between having a governor who is willing to invest money, which is the state's obligation, and probably the most important thing that the state invests money in, and having a governor who eschews that responsibility and is not willing to provide the funding. And we can talk, till we're blue in the face about how much we love the Badgers. But if the state is not willing to fund the university at an appropriate level, then the university is not going to thrive. And consequently, our economy is going to suffer for generations. And we are already seeing that trend in, most starkly and cynically reflected in the rankings. So I think we have to really be honest about what's at stake for the university and for our state. If we're not going to have political leaders who are willing to commit not just to boosterism, but to actually doing our jobs and providing the funding that is needed for the university. And yes, that also means flexibility. That means the ability for the regents to set tuition and manage building projects and bonding, and all of those things are great and important, but it is not a substitute for actually allocating the funds that are needed in the budget. And if you look at some of the things that I think were just really obvious low-hanging fruit, I can see how some people don't like the humanities, maybe they don't like lawyers, that I understand that. But we all need engineers, right? We want to have roads and bridges that function. And for the engineering building, which is, we hear again and again from employers all around the state how they desperately need more engineers. We hear how we could be educating twice as many students in a high growth, high paying career path. And yet the engineering building had to be slow rolled, and it was taken off. It was not approved when it came before the building commission, and it was purely political. That is a shock, because that traditionally has not been politicized. And if we can't even agree on building a new engineering building when there's wires hanging over puddles of water, and I too have gone through that building. The humanities building is also bad. It needs to be replaced. But the idea that we can't even get together on those things makes me a lot less hopeful than Senator Ballweg is about where we are politically and whether or not we're going to meet our responsibility to the university. The building commission process, I think, is a real wake-up call for people who might have thought, well, maybe if we just try harder or make a stronger case or have better relationships with legislators or do more advocacy, then we can X, Y, and Z. But the economic case is so obvious for that building, and the fact is it was still voted down, and instead we got a $1 million appropriation for planning and lost all that time, and now construction costs are higher, and we're in this difficult spiral of trying to catch up, and deal with the supply chain issues of COVID and the labor shortages and all of the things that are going to make that project much more difficult, complicated, and more expensive than it needed to be had we just let the university do it or approved it during the normal course of legislative business. So I hope that I am wrong and that my pessimism is misplaced, but I do think it's really important to speak plainly about what the challenges we face are, and because if we're going to address them, I think we really have to know what we're dealing with.
All right, anyone good on that? Okay, I'm going to take a look at some of the audience questions here, although I haven't had a chance to read them, so hopefully these are good. The legislature already gave UW-Madison its own separate from UW system personnel system, so why would giving bonding authority to UW-Madison be different from that?
I think we kind of addressed that piece with the bonding authority.
I'm not sure I think so.
Okay, let's move on to another one. What does the UW need to do to attract and retain quality students and faculty? And again, what can the state do to support that?
I can start on that one. That's a huge question, very huge question, right? Everything we were just talking about as far as retaining faculty, students, and staff, a lot of it has to do with the economy and, giving people that are coming here, as far as faculty and staff, what they're due. As far as students, I think one of the biggest problems and challenges we have in the state of Wisconsin is financial aid, which has dropped significantly. I have the statistics somewhere, but maybe the professor can help me out here. It's dropped significantly where, we used to pay for Pell Grants a lot more to cover more of their living and tuition. So it's really a problem, even with the tuition freeze, that a lot of students can't come, and they don't even look to the UW campuses thinking that it's a non-starter for so many of them. So I think, we have to do a better job. I know UW-Madison never has a problem of getting enough applicants, but to get them to stay is another story as well. We want to make sure that all students have what they need to get here and to start and to stay. And that besides financial aid, it's also, if we want to get more underrepresented students, we have to really, put our money where our mouth is and really show them that they belong here. And that's, again, there's a lot of things that need to be done to make that happen, not just financially, but changing the dynamics of the campus and what the campus looks like. So many things that we're looking at, but serving and understanding the needs of students. I mean, there's a lot of, not just, there's homelessness, a lot of students sleep in their cars, there's food insecurity, there's a lot of things that we need to address to attract students. And I'm hoping that, I'm gonna not be Pollyannish, but I think that as we build relationships, and I think Senator Royce is right, that what happens in November is extremely important, but I think that there's been a few cracks happening where, if the economy of what's happening, we have proven and over again that every dollar invested there's no loss. So I'm going to be a little bit optimistic about the future. So.
Let's see real quick. In terms of student trying to get more resources for student aid, I mean, this is a fundamental misconception on what happens when tuition increases, right? Imagine tuition's going to go up by $1,000 in state. A big chunk of that is going to be used for financial aid. If you look at most of the flagships, somewhere between 20 and 40%, right? So what you're effectively doing with the tuition increase is to use resources, price discriminate, right? Use resources from someone who can pay and use it to someone who cannot pay. And this is over and beyond Bucky's tuition promise. Latest numbers from UW-Madison were 57% graduated without any debt. And a significant portion of the freshman class is coming in with Bucky's tuition promise. So I think if the state inflation is running at 8 to 10% a year, right? So the fact that we're stuck in nominal terms at the same dollar value of $10,700 really hurts our ability to invest in students and staff and faculty. With faculty, I've talked to both regents and state legislators on both sides of the aisle. There's a great deal of sympathy for pay plans. To the extent that those pay plans could be fully funded, that would be extremely useful for all universities in the UW system in terms of trying to attract and retain good faculty.
Another one from the audience. We've been discussing the state's obligation to the university. What do each of you believe is the university's obligation to the state?
I can go first. So this is something that we have a little more of a legacy model of budgeting. And I would like to see resources allocated more efficiently, right? So to the extent that resources follow student demand, as demand in, say, one field is way higher than demand is in another field. Now, we are operating under pretty significant constraints, like I illustrated earlier. But I think it's what we could do better is to allocate resources more efficiently where the student demand flows or where, for instance, funding agencies have changed priorities. So that's something I think we could do better. We're constantly doing a better job of that, but I believe we could do even more of that.
Interesting that doing something like that is something that UW hasn't been asked to do as robustly as the technical colleges have. They have to actually prove that the programs that they're doing are getting people out into the workforce, and so that some of that is based on their funding, so that they prove that out. I think the difference is that with UW, we still believe, many of us still believe, that there is a a benefit to the arts and to academic arts and to general basic understanding of society, as well as how are you going to get that job. And as we talked about many times, engineering building, we need those engineers coming out into the world to be available. But I think the university has a little bit of a different tack and opportunity for folks than what we're seeing through our technical colleges, which are very much like that. I would also, just in mentioning something that the Regent brought up, having folks finish their college is a problem every place. I'm actually one of the legislators on the Complete College America Wisconsin team, trying to come up with the strategies that are doing these kinds of things. I mean, there are universities that are hiring organizations to go out and find these students that have stopped out for whatever reason. And something that one of my colleagues did several years ago that was only used in the technical college or the two-year campuses that I think probably should be implemented across, and that is the emergency grants that folks have been able to use very effectively, especially in the technical college area where you have many more students who are commuting, but clearly there are things that happen whether you're a full-time on-campus student or a commuting student, that maybe it's been shown that even just a little bit of help when it comes to these emergency grants could be very impactful to keep students moving forward in their education.
I'm just going to add to that as well, and I appreciate, Senator Ballweg, that you brought that up, because just on the issue of not graduating, we know that when a student has, we need more touch points with students, and when there's someone from the campus that shows that they care, it may be simple as like a $100 library bill that they haven't paid, and they've got nothing left in their account, and they drop out. So I think the technical colleges are onto something, but I think the university, as far as what do they owe the legislature, I mean, I think that Madison is a really great example of how, relationships are everything, and it's extremely important to keep building those relationships. I think that it ties in with, not to use the general term of the Wisconsin idea, but absolutely the Wisconsin idea where we permeate and reach every place in this state. And if you talk to people throughout the state, they all have something to say about the University of Wisconsin system, mostly positive. And I think to build better relationships with businesses, students, businesses, faculty, staff, and get out there, it also, if a student builds those relationships, has internships and works at different businesses, they're more likely to stay in the state. And I think we're obligated to do whatever we can to keep students here and give back their knowledge and their input. And so I think it's important that we keep building that, and it's a win-win situation.
So we've seen, not just in Wisconsin, but really throughout the country, a lot of discussion about setting curriculum and what role government should have in dictating what can be taught, whether that's in K-12 or on campuses. Could you each share sort of what you think the appropriate approach should be from the legislative level when it comes to policies of academic freedom and campus speech policies?
Well, we had a very big discussion about this a couple of terms ago in the Colleges and Universities Committee, a bill that was brought forward by, I think, Speaker Voss, and I can't remember who the Senate lead was at the time. But one of the things I pointed out in that hearing is you have administrative code, administrative rules that covers all of these things. And I think part of it is just making sure that there is continuity and transparency in how those things move forward. We have nationwide, we have a lot of vocal folks when it comes to getting their opinions out there, and to the detriment of, I think, calm discussion and give and take and debate. And I think that what happens on campus isn't any different than you see in some of our city councils and school boards and county boards, every place right now. Hopefully this is the end of the pendulum, and we can get back to more discussion when it comes to things when we don't agree. I think that the thing that most people are trying to get to is transparency in what is out there. I know I went to college in the early 70s, and we still all had the concept of, well, what does this instructor really want? You know, should I be writing something this way or that way? Is it going to make a difference? I think that is the age-old fear of any student as they go through their education system, trying to understand, because instructors and professors, they all have their own either invert or biases, and I know they try not to bring that in moreover than not into the work they do, but I think it's a common fear. And so it's gotten to the point now that folks are looking for that transparency so that there isn't something that they're overly fearful of as a repercussion.
This is a critically important question for us to think about because we live in a diverse society. 300 million people with vastly divergent views, not just of right and wrong, but of what the world is, of what the facts are. And our democracy is not going to survive if we cannot figure out a way to live together, even with these totally divergent ways of being and living. And probably the most important way that we can do that is through public education. Public education leads to democracy, and that's true especially at the university and higher education level. And so to the previous question, the most important thing that the university owes to the state, and not to the legislature, but to the state, is to create thinkers who can be good citizens, people who know how to sift and winnow good ideas, people who are willing to engage with people with different ideas, different thoughts, things that are uncomfortable, because that's how you learn and that's how you grow. And if you look at what's happening in our legislature, too many in our political culture have lost the ability and the willingness to do that. And it is very scary because if we can't do that, then we are just down the path of demagoguery and authoritarianism and hatred and division. And when you look at bills that are meant to limit what people can say on campus, whether it's professors or students, that are meant to dictate what can be taught in our public schools and not taught, that take away not just the professionalism of the people leading our educational systems, but the right of students to learn about the world that we live in, you are taking away our ability to function as a democracy. These bills are not put forward in a good faith effort to try to protect people from harmful ideas. They're not put forward to try to make our universities better and more rigorous places. They're put forward to try to scare people and divide people, and they foment hatred against each other. And it is so hard to listen to people obfuscate that obvious truth, that when we're talking about things that just don't even exist in elementary schools, like gender identity or critical race theory, the people who are pushing these bans are not versed in what those things actually are, what actually gender identity and expression is, and how do you help kids who are struggling with their gender identity. It is not about reckoning with America's very difficult past and present with with respect to race. That's not what's being talked about. It is about a political tool to try to make people distrustful of our neighbors, distrustful of our public institutions, and especially education, and to motivate them politically. And it is absolutely cynical, and it is anti-small d democratic, and we have to speak out against it. Everyone, Republicans and Democrats, who cares about education and who cares about preserving our democracy, we have to say no more to this.
We have about 10 minutes left. This has flown by. So I'm going to get one more quick one in, and then I think I'll kind of let each of you address anything that has been said that you'd like to address, or give any sort of closing statement. One of the symptoms of divided government over the last session, since Governor Evers has been in office, is that not a lot of his appointees and nominees have been confirmed, and that has affected the Board of Regents. So I'd like to hear about, does that actually have an effect on the way that the board functions? And going forward, Senator Ballweg being in the majority, do you see a world in which those nominees do get a vote?
Well, I know that all the nominees that came to my committee were forwarded, except they were all forwarded. There was one that didn't get to the floor because it was very, very late in the process, but they all went through my committee. I have not specifically looked at what's been happening on the Regent side of things. I would think that a new session is going to take a new look at all of those nominations, as the majority of those nominations, went forward earlier in the session. So I haven't kept count myself.
Being an unconfirmed regent, I can speak personally to this. There are 7 of us that are not confirmed. We all went through a confirmation hearing. It's a very strange place to be. As far as an effect on how we function, it does not have an effect. We make jokes about it. When we look at our calendars and look toward January, we talk about, well, if we're out of here, we'll go to Hawaii or something. But we are lucky in the sense that we're seated at the table and we're functioning as a full board. And it's amazing. The one thing that, as far as a board of regents with diverse backgrounds and different varying viewpoints, we have amazing dialogue. And I would like to bring it out more into the public, because we really agree on much more than we disagree. And whether we're confirmed or unconfirmed, no one sits around and takes notice of that. It makes me sad as a citizen of this state that there's political fodder with confirmed and unconfirmed boards all over the state. I mean, we're volunteers. I know that may sound funny to you, but it's a 7-year volunteer position. And it just feels, it doesn't feel good when you put your heart and soul into this, like most of my colleagues, and want to serve the state. And it's political fodder for whoever is in and whoever wants to get elected. I don't think most people even take notice of it. So I don't know, I really don't understand it, but I'm hoping that we can move forward. And again, we are doing our work as the Board of Regents, and we're really doing whatever we can to move ahead and move the University of Wisconsin into the future. We're a little late to the game as far as systems, but we're working hard. And I really, like I said, my colleagues don't have, there's no weight given to who's confirmed and unconfirmed.
Well, I think Regent Bogost's equanimity shows why she should be confirmed and why her colleagues should have been confirmed. And unfortunately, I think it's a pretty cynical power ploy to just not confirm and hope that a new governor will be able to then stack the board immediately with his or her appointees. That is, not how the Board of Regents or these other boards have been structured. They're structured so that, you don't have these giant swings, that you have some continuity, some institutional knowledge, and so that people have a chance to get to know one another and work together, not so that you can chuck them out wholesale if your guy gets in office. And it is another sign of our political dysfunction and the the big challenges that we face and why the less interference that the political parts of government have on the university, the better off the university will be. And it's very sad to say that.
Well, with about 5 minutes left, I'd like to just give you each an opportunity to respond to anything that went unaddressed from earlier. I know some of you have been making some notes, so I'd like to give you that opportunity. Otherwise, I'll give you a softball question and just ask you to tell us what, from your perspective, if you were talking to someone outside of Wisconsin, what the University of Wisconsin brings to the state.
I mean, being an economist, I can't just stop at talking about the economic impact all over the state, so much so that even folks in Minnesota benefit from us. This is an amazing institution. I want to give out a shout out to Chancellor Blank for the amazing work she's done over the last 9 years or so, just under extremely difficult circumstances. But the fact that we've been able to maintain our quality in the face of severe constraints is pretty remarkable. And we remain a great institution, and I hope we would continue to be so going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think the university is what brings the best and brightest to Wisconsin and allows us to keep the young people that we are able to keep here. And that's true not just of the undergraduate schools, which get a lot of attention, and rightfully so, but also our graduate programs. When you think about, I'm the oldest of 4 girls, and we all went away for undergrad. I came back for law school, as did one of my sisters who's graduating in May. But if you look at my youngest sister, she's getting her PhD at Harvard, and she wanted to be at Wisconsin, but there was just no question that she could afford it because Wisconsin wasn't able to offer the same kind of package that she was offered from Harvard and Brown and all these other top-tier institutions. And if it was close, she would have made it work, but it was an all or nothing proposition. And I think too many incredibly bright people find themselves in the position of having to say no or make very difficult financial decisions because our university is working so hard to scrape together money and funding for graduate students, which really drive the R1 part of the equation. And so I would say, if we want to make this state great and have it be a wonderful place for people to live and work and thrive and learn, we've got to pay a little bit more of attention to the graduate side of the equation too.
This is an amazing place, University of Wisconsin-Madison, something that I've always been really proud of. I grew up in Madison, moved away to different places and came back, and I was so proud of the Wisconsin idea and what it means to everybody. But I think that a lot of times we rest on our laurels, and it is amazing that with all, the conflicts and the adversities, how we've come through, but we can do a lot better. I mean, when I go around and talk to faculty, staff, and students, and they're so dedicated and so loyal, and we need to do a much better job in acknowledging that loyalty. It's not just, you get to be here. I mean, that's not going to carry us into the future. We need to address a lot of shortcomings, and it's, even with students, I mean, when I talk to groups of students, I really literally a lot of times just walk away crying of all that they go through to be here. It's, the majority of these students work so hard and they have 1 or 2 jobs, and we need to do much more to support them and show them that we care because, it's, I think everyone would agree, no matter what side of the aisle you are, that this is the best investment in the state, but we need to show it more, so.
And I'll say, as the professor said, it brings folks in from all over. My son-in-law actually graduated in the engineering school. He came from Massachusetts. My other daughter's partner actually did his master's and postdoc and doctorate in computer. He came from California. And I do have to say that my daughter-in-law is also economist, who was from here in Madison, went to school here. I wanted to go back to something that the professor said about the societal rate of return. And actually, something that I've worked on more than higher ed has been early childhood education. And I think the thing that we really need to focus on even more might not be the best thing for folks in this room, but things that we need to focus on even more is that investment in early childhood. Right now, that's going to be better for our state, and I'm sure the professor knows someone who I'm a big fan of as an economist, James Heckman, down in Chicago. So I think early childhood is another thing that we really need to focus on, which is going to make everything better for all of us here in Wisconsin. And I didn't want to get away without mentioning something about that. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention is, just talking about the power of UW-Madison, because it is not just here on campus with things that Madison is collaborating with, the Dairy Hub, the Freshwater Collaborative, the UW-Madison Nelson Institute. I know that they do a lot of work in my district, in the 14th district, on Green Lake and so on. So many things that happen here on campus doesn't stay on campus. And I think that's the real strength of Madison. And it's been like that forever. The farm my husband grew up on just outside of Madison, I know my mother-in-law talked about how she called all the time to ask about questions about what was happening to help her and her family on their dairy farm. So it is a legacy that I hope we can continue to build on. And at this point, I think we are, but I don't disagree that we have to look very carefully at how we continue to support the system as well as the Madison campus specifically. So with that, thank you all very much for being here, and I hope you've seen that we do have a diversity of opinions, but we can talk about them. So thank you very much.
And thank you to all of our panelists, and thanks to all of you for being here and for all your great questions.
Yes, you too.
Well, I wanted to mention to you, I don't know if you know this, but it was probably